Okay.
All right, cool. We'll get out of here pretty quick, but we're just tech systems. We like to help people find jobs if they're looking. Oliver has all my contact information. Randy does as well. I could leave some business cards here, but definitely reach out to me offline. We can figure out what you're really looking for. I don't want to waste you guys' time talking about job opportunities that are irrelevant. So we'll connect offline and see what you're looking for so we can help you out. We just got Oliver a new job. He's loving it, I think.
Yes,
so.
totally loving it. Totally loving it.
Okay, awesome. So Jimmy Johns, dive in, fellas, and then we'll get out of here. Let the PowerShell begin.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for
This is my
that.
partner, Charlene. Charlene right here.
Hi, Charlene.
Hi.
Thanks, guys.
Good evening. Okay, folks. So again, my name is Mark MacLachlan. I used to teach VBScript for Microsoft and converted my skills over to PowerShell a number of years ago. This user group used to be over at Interface Technical Training. I think I recognize some faces over here. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I used to go to that for a couple of years when that was still there until Jason and Mike Pfeiffer, Jason Helmick and Mike Pfeiffer quit, and Jason went to work for Microsoft to work on Exchange, and Jason went and worked with Don Jones. So then this group disappeared for a little while and then came back. So I'm excited to be back and hope to become a regular here. We're going to be going over using PowerShell and making GUI applications. So there's a couple of ways that we can go about doing this, and I'm going to share some free software with you. Free is always best, right? Got some that's actually pretty comprehensive, which is nice. And then I've got a low-cost version that is actually fully comprehensive. That's only $40 for a license, so that's really not too bad. So the first one that we're going to take a look at is something called the AZPosh editor. This was a product that was similar to Sapien's Primal Forms, and the company couldn't compete with Sapien. So they were going under, and before they did so, they took their license and they made it open to everybody for both commercial and non-commercial use. Oh, nice. So that was their way of saying, you know, flipping the bird to Sapien. The product is obviously not being developed any further, so there are a couple of minor little glitches in it that generally are related to copying and pasting from external sources into the program. But it's quite a nice editor, though. It's a little bit wordy when it creates code, though. There's a lot of extra stuff that it puts in there, and I'm not a big fan of that. I like to have as little code as possible to make it easier to read. So that's one reason why I don't use that as much. The next source that we're going to take a look at is poshgui.com. This is a free website that will allow you to create a form. It works the same way as Visual Studio, similar tools. It just doesn't have all the bells and whistles that Visual Studio might have. The last of the free ones that I have for you, and this is one of the files that you all got, is a form builder PS1 file that you can run within the ISE, and it will actually let you build a form directly in PowerShell ISE. It's very bare bones, though, not a lot to it. We'll take a look at that as well. Then the last one that I have for you, and this is my new favorite, is PowerShell Pro Tools for Visual Studio. What I really like about this is it also works with Visual Studio Community Edition. So you can have the free version of Visual Studio, and you install the PowerShell Pro Tools, and then it allows you full Visual Studio capability for creating your forms. Really powerful. It will combine your code and the form into one script for you, which is really sweet. So let's take a look at the admin script editor. This is the one file that I'm afraid that the people accessing on Git will not be able to get, but you can Google for this thing. It's on, there's a website, IT Ninja, and they just make you jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get to the download, which is why I wanted to make sure that I had a copy with me for the folks that were here in person. As you can see, this comes up just like any kind of standard script editor. important buttons that for us to recognize are the run button up here, and then when we want to launch the form editor, it's this button over here. And this is what their forms editor looks like. As you can see, this is very similar to Visual Studio. You've got all your controls on the left-hand side, the form in the center, and you just simply click and then drag inside the form to create whatever object you want. You can put your labels, you can put your buttons, you can then set actions on each of those things. And then there's an option from there where you can tell it to put the code back into the script, and then it merges everything together. One of the glitches that you may encounter with the admin script editor is if you have done that merge back, modify some code, and then go back and modify the form again. When it writes back, it may overwrite some of the stuff if you modified where it didn't want you to. And occasionally I find I need to do that. The PowerShell ISC Forms Builder, I have, this is a screenshot of it here, and I'm actually going to launch that for you just to give you a very quick demo on what that looks like. So let me go to my PowerShell. And here's our Forms Builder. Here's the Forms Builder. So when I run this script, so it's just, all you need is just that script. When you run it, it pops up. Oh, we're not presenting this. Okay.
If you're showing, this is a different screen.
Yeah. Okay. So I ran the script, and this is what it gives us. Now, what you can do is you just click the drop down for here, and you'll pick one of the objects. Then you come over here, and you should be, oh, add, and there it is. So it's created our text box here. I can drag that around to wherever I want it to go. It's really bare bones minimum stuff, though. This does not give you the ability to set click actions and stuff like that, so you have to know a little bit of coding to be able to modify the script afterwards. And that's one of the reasons why I only use this if I need something really minor. But it's free, and it's, you know, it is pretty cool that somebody thought of how to do this.
Does it cover like drop-down lists and stuff like that?
Yes, it does. It has. It's hard to read on the screen because it's so tiny. But it has. Here, I'm going to call it up again on my local PC so I can read it. So it has a text box, a masked text box. You can use that for your passwords. A list box, combo box, labels, data grids, buttons, checkbox, date time picker, list view, a picture box, rich text box, tree view, and a web browser. So it's got a number of good things there, but you really can't get into positioning stuff exactly unless you go back to the code afterwards. You know, if you're trying to line things up, if you're as anally retentive as I tend to be when I'm trying to make a form for other people to use, it's got to be pixel by pixel lined up, otherwise I go crazy. So, you know, so this doesn't really let you do that. You would have to go back into the code to be able to address that. So the one that I think that everybody will really like the most is our Posh GUI website. So let's see here. How do I get back to where I was? There we go. So, oh, sorry. The last one that I had on the other slide was the Visual Studio and PowerShell Pro Tools. This is what this looks like. And you can see that when you're creating a solution, you have the option for PowerShell, and you can say that it's a PowerShell script project. This is $40. I can tell you that I have spoken directly to the developer for this. He is extremely responsive. He's really impressive. Usually he gives me an email back in 10 minutes.
Is this the one from Adam Driscoll?
Yes, it is.
Okay. That's what I thought. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, he's great in my opinion. He was really helpful. The last version had a small bug in it, and he was, you know, conversing back and forth with me, helping me work through it while he was fixing it. And the version that is available now has that all fixed. So I have nothing but good things to say about this product. The Visual Studio with PowerShell Pro Tools, you have the option under advanced settings of your project to say to bundle, and so that way when you build your solution, it will combine both the form and the script code that you've written. You work on both of those in separate on separate tabs, referencing back and forth, and we're going to take a look at how some of that works in just a moment. And the last thing here is what their interface looks like. And so here you can see, I mean, this is Visual Studio, so the most common programming tool on the planet probably. And it looks very similar to what we saw before, the ASC, et cetera. But let's take a look now at our free solution. This is Posh GUI, and they don't have quite as many controls as Visual Studio has, but this makes some of the cleanest looking code that's available, and it offers most of what you need. So we can see on the left-hand side there that we have a text box, we have a button and a label, picture box, check boxes, combo box, list view, list box, and radio buttons. We can see that on the right-hand side there, I've got the form name at the top, text that will appear at the top of my form. I can change a lot of the properties on here. And then on the bottom center section, we can see it shows us what the actual PowerShell code is. And there's a blue button there, copy code, that'll copy it to your clipboard and allow you then to paste that into ISE. And so it works just super cleanly. And that's what I designed this presentation off of. So let's take a look at the agenda that I've got for us. I want us to be able to make an Active Directory tool that's just going to do some simple stuff to show you how you can start off with the form and then add regular PowerShell code that you guys already probably understand and know, and see how simple it is to add it into this interface. So we're going to begin by creating a form with labels, text boxes, buttons, checklist box, and checkboxes. We're going to add code to the click events. We're going to allow for the user to browse to an Active Directory organizational unit. So it'll bring up a tree view for us and allow us just to click on that on where we want to create a user. We're going to look at dynamically populating a checked list box. I've got that for groups. So if I'm querying an existing user, it will show me a list of all the groups that they're a member of. It shows me all the groups in AD, and it will only check those that they are a member of for me. I did not bother with coding to add two groups for the presentation. I didn't want to make it too complicated. But to do that would not be very hard to do. We're going to query Active Directory. We're going to look at creating a new user, and we're going to look at deleting a user as well. And again, these are all going to use standard Active Directory commandlets that everybody is probably familiar with. This is what I made the form look like. Yeah, a little colorful, but I was just playing with it with the buttons and stuff. Here we can see we've got a user ID, just some general details on the user: first name, middle initial, last name, their description, what OU we want them to be on. You see the select button on the right-hand side for the OU. Their email, what groups they would be a member of, and that will automatically populate when it talks to Active Directory. You can set the password, and we can specify whether or not the person needs to change the password or whether or not it never expires. All right, so as I mentioned before, we have that copy code button there that after we design a form, we're going to go ahead and hit that copy button. So I'm going to browse out now to Posh GUI and just give you a quick demo here. Okay, so here we are, Posh GUI. Now, like I had shown you my screenshot before, we're just going to pick a size here. We'll give our form a name. We'll call this AD tool. And I want to change the text that appears in this top left-hand corner. So that's the text property right over here. Call that AD tool also. And then I'll show you how I was creating the text boxes and everything. So I like to start with my label, put my label here, and then change the text for that and specify, whatever it is that's going to be. So in this case, it's going to be our user ID. And then I would put a text box next to that. Now, I want to talk about the naming of anything that we create in the form, because you're going to need to be able to reference that as a variable later on. I like to use my own naming convention. For text boxes, I preface everything with TB. For text box labels, I do LB and whatever it is. So this would be, LB user ID. Making things as easy to remember as possible. For checkboxes, I use CB. For list boxes, I'll use LB there. Radio buttons, RB, etc. And I just find that makes it a little bit easier for me when I later on go into ISE to modify things. Because it's alphabetical, I see, that the autocomplete will show me whatever it is that I'm trying to get to pretty quickly. So that'll speed you up a little bit. So let's take a look if we wanted to put a text box in here now. And we can put that in there, and you can drag to make it larger, however you want to do, like that. And so the name of this one would be TB user ID. You can see on the right-hand side, we do have properties for the text box, such as multi-line. So if you wanted to be able to have multiple lines of code or text appear, I've written one application where I created a multi-line text box, and then as I did steps, I would tell it to write to that, and just had a scrolling list that kept on updating that. So commands would push down and showing me the status and everything of what was happening. So gave myself my own little diagnostic information. Your buttons, when we have a button, we put that in here. Now, when you want to program that button, you want to go over here on the right-hand side to show events. And here are the different events that we can do, and the most popular one is the click feature for a button. So when I specify that, if we look over here at our code, there's our button. And what we're going to see here, right there, add here code triggered by the event. So that's where you would paste in whatever you want that button to do when you take this code and move it over to PowerShell ISE. Now, I don't think it's necessary to recreate the entire form, because I actually have that all together here for us in my PowerShell, which
Probably open on a different window.
that's what I'm thinking. It's probably on the other screen.
Yeah, that should just be it.
Let's see if we can see it now. No. Very strange. Sorry, we're experiencing technical difficulties. All right, let me just close it down and I'll reopen it.
Was it doing something?
No, I don't think it was.
Well, that's on the screen.
Yeah, there we go. And basic form, there it is.
The forms that you create within the Posh GUI, the website,
Yes,
when you change the size of the form, how does it handle that?
it changes in that code area. It specifies that you've changed the dimensions of that object.
I mean, once you have the code, you already have the script, and you run it, and then you try to resize the actual window that's already been generated. Does it allow it to be?
Yes, yeah, that works fine. I have found that when I was using Internet Explorer, or no, excuse me, when I was using Firefox, that it had problems with allowing me to scroll to the very end if I wanted to just view the code and everything. So I found it seems to work best in Chrome and in either Edge or Internet Explorer. So this is the exact code that got created. Pardon me?
Can you make that bigger?
Can I make it bigger? Yes.
Control, scroll bar. Oh, oh. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Make it so the blind like me can see it. Now, so this is the code that we get. This is completely unmodified version right here. And we can see all of those trigger events right here where it's got the code for us. The comments so that we know where we would need to paste in our information. When we run this, it's not going to actually do anything other than, I was trying to find our Active Directory now, but that's why we have errors. However, it does bring up our form for us. So that much we know is working. My resolution's a little weird here because I cut off the never expires there, but so we know that now that this little bit of code that we got from Posh GUI is okay. But now we would need to modify stuff. So I gave you guys access all to the different bits of code that I was using. Let me open those up as well here. Let's do our OU picker first. So the OU picker, this is a function that I grabbed off the internet. This guy, I'm not even sure how to say that first name, Micaiah van der Zalm, did a really nice job writing and sharing a little piece of code here that just brings up our Active Directory browser to select an OU. So this code, you would copy all of this, and then if we go back to our form one, and in here, if we do a search for the word select, and right here is where that code would get pasted into. All right. So we paste it in, we add in our code for the select statement in there. That's about 300 lines of code that he wrote. And then we would move on to our next function that we have. So I have all of these set up here. Whoops. Edit that one. Open with PowerShell.
Would it be easier to dot source it in so you could just dot source the file in?
Sorry, say again?
Would it be easier to dot source the function in so that you that all you really have is your GUI code there? Just curious.
I suppose you could do that, although I don't really know how the form would react. I've never tried it. So it's a good question.
Okay.
So this is, here we are, form one now. This is the same code that you have, but in this one I added in all of that function right here. Okay, it's rather lengthy. There's a ton going on here.
Wow.
Oh, it's there you go. That's a signature, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Gosh.
Either that or it's an icon.
Oh.
I don't know if you've ever added an icon to anything like this, but that's what it looks like, yeah.
A64 encoded.
So that gives us all of that, and I can show you what that actually looks like when it is running. I have my virtual machine here. Send the command. Okay, so here is our thing, and here's our tool. And when we run this, now I have Active Directory installed on this box. And so we can see that it spoke to Active Directory, and it pulled a list of all of the group names here, and it's populated those into our checked list box. None of them are selected because we don't have a user here. When I hit the select button, this is going to run that code for the OU. Brings up this nice little tree view for us. We can pick an OU. When we say OK, then part of my code, it adds then our distinguished name for the OU into that field. This allows me later to use that then for if I'm creating a new user or something and specifying where I want them to be created. I can show you, if I come in here, user ID, I'll type a user ID, and I can do a get, and here it pulls information from Active Directory. So this is just another one of the functions that I've given you there for getting user information. To create a new user, I can just type a bunch of stuff in here, hit the new button, and it's going to create that new user in Active Directory. I'll show you right now. Let me get the ADUC running here. Here we go. You can see my user ID right there, Mark. I've got it highlighted in the or selected in here. If I hit delete, it prompts me, "Are you sure you want to do it?" Yep. And if I refresh over here, we can see my user object just disappeared. Wow. So very, very simple stuff. Let's take a look at what some of this code looked like then. I think everybody probably is very familiar with these things. Or is everybody here used to working in AD? Okay, so you got a couple different commands you're going to do. Let's take a look at our one for getting user information first, okay? So here we go. So
You want to stop the other one first?
thank you.
No, it's a power. Just push them.
Yeah, I need to close the form actually. If I can find it. There we go. Okay. That's one thing that I have found is if you have a form running and you try to hit the red stop button, it will not stop.
Oh, wow.
You have to close the form first, and then it returns control back to the ISE. So
Wait till you get an infinite loop in your code. I've done that before. That sucked. Then they close out of it.
So what we've got here, we can see in my testing, I was hard coding with a username Mark Mac, but to have it actually talk to the form, we would use this one. Whoops. So as you can see here, I've got my variable for user ID, and I'm setting that equal to the text value of my text box, so the text box user ID. So when you're designing your forms, we don't use the $ in the forms designer for our fields. But when we reference them in the code, you got to throw the $ in front because it's a variable. In here, we're doing, I'm specifying that my user is going to be equal to get-AD user, and specifying the identity is the user ID that we pulled from the form. So that would be the only piece of information I need to enter to get a user, is just what's their login ID, and it's going to return all the rest of the fields for me. Fields that I'm grabbing, I'm getting the given name in Active Directory. If you look through ADSI Edit, you're going to find some anomalies in the naming convention, just some weirdness there. So first names are given names. The middle initial is initials, plural. The last name is surname. When Microsoft created the getAdUser commandlet, they tried to make some of it a little bit more friendly. So when you look in Active Directory, the property for an email address, you've got two. You've got the standard one, which is mail, and then you have proxy addresses, which is an array of different addresses that you can have. When they created getAdUser, they said, everybody says it's email, so we're going to call it email address. They created an alias to point to that property. First name, last name are recognized by getAdUser. Not an AD, but this tool, the commandlet will translate those for you. So a couple of weird things there that if you're looking at some code, just be aware that they did try to make it a little bit more user-friendly. Personally, I think they just should have stuck with what is and always has been in Active Directory, because if I have a question, I'm opening up ADSI Edit and I'm looking for whatever properties it is. So, so we're going to grab that information, our distinguished name. That's important, so we know how to access everything. You see here, I've got the mail description, member of, so that's our groups. And we're selecting all those same properties at the end here. So now we have our user, and we have a bunch of properties that are associated with it. So I'm specifying that the first name is equal to user.givenName. My middle initial variable, MI, is equal to $user.initials. Last name is the surname, etc., just as we were just talking about. For the groups, I have to do a little bit different stuff here. So to get group memberships, you have to say get AD group, and then I'm saying filter star here because on this form I wanted it to show all the groups, right? Because eventually this tool would be expanded to allow me to join people to new groups. I would add a button for update for the user. So what we've got going on here is first I get a listing of all of the groups, and then I make sure that I clear out whatever items are in my list. So when I first opened up the form, it talked to AD, it said, here's the list of groups. Well, I don't want to write that list back and duplicate everything, so I'm clearing the list on line 13. Then I set up a counter, and I go through each group, and as I do, what I'm going to do is compare it to see whether or not the person is a member of that group. And if they are, then on line 20, I'm saying, make that be checked. Is that clear? Cool. And then we just increment our variable, our counter. Then I continue on with the rest of the stuff the same way, getting our description, our first name, middle initial, etc. Getting the parent OU. So, if you want to know where an existing user exists, grab the distinguished name, and you can use this split command, and it will subtract out for you the first section after LDAP there. So it'll just give you what the parent location is. All right. So I took all of this code then and went back to our basic form, and I looked up my button for get. Oh, that's going to be a lot of gets probably. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Search right.
That's me every time.
Button get. There we go. So here, line 155. This is where that code that we were just looking at would then get pasted in. Part of my methodology for creating any kind of a script in general is I like to start simple and then expand outward. And so this is an easy way to do that. I can take just small pieces of code and just slowly edit this thing and add the functions in to those buttons. and I can test along the way, okay, that looked good, that worked, it didn't work, whatever, modify if I need to, and then move on to the next one. All right, so let's look at our new user stuff. So the code for our new user, this is going to look a little bit familiar. First off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read information that the user has entered into my form. I'm going to set the display name to be equal to the given name plus a space plus the middle initial plus a space plus the surname. One thing I did not take into account for here is if they don't put in a middle initial, now I'm going to have 2 spaces between first and last name for the display name. So that's an area for improvement that we could do on here. We use our new AD user commandlet and specify the name is going to be equal to the text box user ID text value. The SAM account name is going to be the same thing, the description we're going to pull, etc. There's nothing cryptic in here. Now, this code does assume that whoever is running this has the rights to do it. You could use -credential to specify a different user ID, or I can show you guys some other code that I have on my laptop where you can encrypt credentials and then you can pull them in. So you can either prompt for a password or you can pull those in. I've done a password change utility for our service desk. We have a number of users at US Foods that don't have the ability because they're at affiliates, they're not on our network. They can't change their password, so they'll call in and get that changed, or we have people that have messed up their password, so we have to reset it for them to get them to be able to log in and change it themselves then. So in that case, not all of our help desk people have the rights to access Active Directory. So I have a service account that I pull the credentials in so that my tool has access, and then what I do is I put the tool within an Active Directory share where only the people that are authorized to do this can access it using NTFS permissions, and then they're able to do the work there. That's not the most secure thing because obviously if they have access to that, then they could copy it to their local machine, and now the NTFS permissions are gone and they could hand that off to anybody. But there comes a time where you got to say, if you don't trust your IT people, just shoot them. I mean, I always have told every employer, if you can't trust me, just shoot me, because the FBI has my fingerprints from the military. So I'm too paranoid to do anything really bad. So let's take a look further at our code here. So that's our basic new user stuff. But then once we set a user, we're creating that user. Initially, they are going to be a disabled user because we haven't provided a password yet. So next, we're going to call the set AD account password and specify that our account is the text box user ID text value. And then we're going to reset and use a new password, and we're pulling in the password field. You can see on line 3, our password, we're taking the text box entry, converting that to a secure string, and then pushing that into AD. Now, last things that I had on there was checkboxes to see whether or not a user account is going to expire or whether or not they have to change their password. So for that, I'm looking at whether or not those boxes have been checked. And so here's the format of that. So if checkbox no expired dot checked, if that's true, set the value $no expire to be equal to true. Otherwise, set it to false. So this allows me, when I send this code, I'm specifying the same variable $no expire, whether it's true or false. I don't have to modify what command I issue. I just feed into it what the value is that I need. I do the same thing for whether or not they have to change their password. And we can see here that we're doing a set AD user. So we've already created the user object, so it's not new. We're doing a set. Identity is the same user as we've been pulling, text box user ID text. And now we're going to enable that account because we did set the password. And we're going to say whether or not the password expires, yes or no. change password at next logon, yes or no here. And then the last thing that we're going to do after creating that is we're going to just close our whole form. Okay, they're done, they did what they needed to do, boom, reset it. Okay, just close it out, and they're ready to go on for their next call. Getting group information. Group information, not a lot of code on this one compared to the selecting an OU, right? So here I set the group value equal to get AD group dash filter star, so give me all groups, select just the name and the distinguished name for those. Then for each group, I'm going to create a combo, or excuse me, a checked list box and add an item to that checked list box. Now, I want to just point out the checked list box does not exist in Posh GUI. So if I get my mouse to go back there, we're going to bring this back over. So we can see here on the left-hand side, we have a list box. So what I did was I created a list box, and then after I copied the code into PowerShell ISC, I just searched for that list box, and I changed it from list box to checked list box. And that's in the code that I provided to you as well. I'll show you that. So if we go to, one, two, here we go. Okay, so what I did here was I just searched down here looking for where that list box was, okay? And do a find. Let's search up this time. There we go. So you can see here where it says checked list box. That initially said list box from the Posh GUI code. So this is an area where, okay, they don't have every control in the book available that we would have in Visual Studio, but they've got one that's close enough that I can work with it. Just add that control in, get the size and everything in position where I want it to be, use that, and then just change the type of box that it is. And that worked out really well. When I initially created this, I used, for my naming convention, I used list box because that's what it was. When I made it a checked list box, I added a C in front of there to make it checked list box. So this is pretty much all that it takes to be able to take any script and be able to give it a nice GUI front end for it. Just a couple of examples of some others that I have. Let me call something up here for you. Okay, so I have this one for work, for creating. We have different divisions. We've got a whole bunch. They've got a 2-digit letter code. It's a number and a letter that indicate, a city and state location. And we have a naming convention. So my location is 1P. And when I hit that, it automatically starts my name forming the alias of a distribution list as 1P-DL- and then whatever I want to name that. I can specify who the manager is going to be, and I just put their email address in there. And then what members do I want to be a member of it? I just have to plug those login IDs in here. I can paste the whole list in here. When I hit my create button, it automatically talks to AD and it does that for me. So this is something that works out really well. I had a when I was a consultant, I worked for a place that they were a mental health place, and they purchased local businesses to expand. So if they wanted to move into another state, they would find a mental health hospital, they would buy it. They then had to integrate those people into their Microsoft Exchange environment, and they needed to set up the conference rooms at the new locations that they just bought to be part of their Exchange organization. So we set up a naming convention there, so that again they had a division code, or a location code, and then whatever they wanted to call that particular meeting room. And I made a similar interface, because the people that had to do the job, they didn't know Exchange. They also didn't know PowerShell. So I just made them a simple little GUI, and all they had to do is type in these little things, hit the go button, and it would automatically connect into Exchange, run the necessary commands to create those entries, and report back to them, hey, it's all done. So it was something that was very simple for them. And so this is just another example that of stuff that you can do. You can basically take any script that you're prompting for stuff. I like to have GUIs, and I like to have buttons for selecting a source file. So if I need to read a CSV, I want it to call up a directory browser. Don't make the person type the path into the darn thing. Let them navigate to it. They can type it in if they want. I code for that too, but I want to make it as user-friendly as I possibly can by allowing them to just browse over to that. So that's some of the stuff you can do. You can use this code to be able to create pop-ups and things like that to get any kind of information too. So let me see what other scripts I have here that might be good. Okay, let's see if this one, pretty sure this one does it. So magic transfer. So when I run this bad boy, let's close this one out. And that's what's up over on my other screen. Here we go. So magic transfer. So this is script code that I wrote for my help desk guys. They needed the ability to take a person's old laptop, set up a new laptop, and everybody's picky. They want their documents, they want their all their favorites and all that stuff, right? So I typed in the old computer name, I typed in the new computer name, and I specify what login ID they have, and then I'd make it clone everything over. And learning how to do that was really kind of interesting. I can show you.
Does that work with moving it from, say, Windows 7 to Windows 10?
Yes, it does.
Using USMT?
No.
No, you're not using USMT.
No, I'm going to show you what I'm using. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in here. For Chrome, I'm doing invoke commands. I'm talking to different registry settings. I'm getting that stuff and then just writing that into the existing. For Chrome, I found one of the problems or prerequisites for this tool to work is you had to log on to the new machine as the user, and you had to manually launch Chrome so that it would create the directory structure that it wanted to be able to copy into. Without that, a lot of the registry settings weren't there, and everything was just too hairy. And we only wanted to get the favorites. We did not, any bookmarks that they had, we wanted to preserve. We didn't want to carry over any other add-ins or anything like that because they could be causing problems, and that might be why they were moving over to a new machine. Same thing here, checking for installed browsers. So I've got support in here for IE, Chrome, and Firefox. I prompt my user for their administrative credentials. And then here, so this is the section for getting IE favorites. Here's for getting my Chrome favorites, Firefox, all this stuff. They all handle it differently. The easiest one is Internet Explorer. I mean, you can just browse to the files, But for both Chrome and for Firefox, they're just text files that store the stuff, but it's a little bit, it's hidden. So you gotta find something that, of course, the files don't have extensions and everything, and Windows just loves not having an extension on something, right?
User Excel macro files. I just had to hunt for that because I had no idea. There's like 2 of our users that use these extensively. No one else uses them.
Right, and so there you go. There's your path to
Solution
it.
for 2.
App data, roaming, Microsoft Excel, Excel stuff. That's where they're located. So all I'm doing here is doing a straight copy item from old to new and saying, I want it to be recursive, so it'll get any subdirectories that might be there. User documents folder. So here we get their docs. User PST files. And let's see what else we got. Their Outlook signature, so we can migrate that without having to have them set that up again. This is an Alliant database. It's just a database thing. So we've got a couple Lotus Notes users out there. We've been trying to migrate away from Lotus Notes for, I don't know, since we installed Lotus Notes. And it's basically mostly just our accounting people. They have a bunch of stuff that's just archived in there. And so they all use Exchange, but they've got a lot of history stuff that's out there, so we still need to have that. Getting their map drives, getting their printers. Now, getting printer information, that one was really interesting because what I found is that there's no get-printer until Exchange 5.0, until PowerShell 5.1. So
Wow.
you got to have 5.1. That was the other prerequisite for my tool, so that forced us to have to roll out new PowerShell to everything, which I was happy about though because I wanted that. So
You're saying Windows 7 would be able to do it?
yeah,
I thought that was an OS feature that
no,
allows you to do
it's
get printed.
5.1.
Oh, awesome.
He's like, I'm gonna update
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Well, it's a huge thing to be able to do that. We don't have to do it as much anymore, but
Yeah, so
there's
update your
help.
.NET framework and boom, you're away you go. Bob Jack?
So you have to have 5.1?
To use that command line, use the
Yeah.
get-printer.
Get printer configuration, all those things you can capture it into a file. Yeah, just copy printers. It's pretty cool. All
Yeah.
this little stuff you can do with it. But I thought it was a Windows 8.1 and Windows 10 feature. I didn't realize it was. Yeah.
How about this one? New email. Let's take a look at this.
So for this, the user has to log into the new computer and generate their user account on that
Correct.
first. All right.
Yeah.
I thought you're
And you-
doing it without the user ever touching it initially. So
No, if you need to do that, there is a utility. It's by a company, ForenSIT, FORENSIT. And it's a profile migration tool. It works amazingly well. They let you use it for free. They prefer that you buy a license, and they actually are reasonable on licenses. It only winds up being like $1 a user. So if you've got, a project where you got to move 20 people or something, you can do that. And that works really well too if you are changing your Active Directory. So if you're joining a computer, so let's say you've gone through a merger and you've got a small division, it's got, let's say again, 20 computers that are there. You can use the ForenSIT product to tell it, okay, I've set up a trust between the two. I want you now to join that domain, and we're going to convert the existing user profile to the new domain. So their desktop remains 100% the same. Their icons are all where they were before, but now they're a member of a different organization. So that's a really cool utility that you can use that does an awful lot.
I don't know if it helps any, but I wrote something that creates a user profile using the user 32 DLL that I have on a gist. If you want it, I can share it.
I think that would be great.
So it creates a profile on the new computer without their authentication, or?
Well, without, all you have to do is log in as an administrator, and then you specify the user account you wanted to create, and it'll invoke the user what is it, the standard C libraries and not the native code, or gosh, I forget the right terminology. Anyway, it's the C code under with pinvoke.
Could you use invoke command from an admin workstation and target a remote computer then to do that?
I don't know. I haven't tried it that way. All I did was try it locally. I imagine what you could do is, create a expression and do an invoke command, right? Bundle that code inside the expression. But I don't know. I haven't tried it.
Is it a domain user account or just a local user account?
What I built it for was for a domain user account for it to create the local profile for that domain user. I'll share the code.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Hey, you can integrate it into your copy.
Yeah.
If you can generate the account.
Be one less step for you.
I gotta find where you type again.
There.
Yeah, the Win32
Except
API
for
is
Chrome.
really powerful, but just not documented well.
And then
So who's ever gotten an embarrassing email by mistake?
Oh.
Or, send something you shouldn't have, or, some user got some kind of spam thing and they forwarded it to everybody, and you need to get it out of your Exchange environment, right? So I wrote this nuke email code, and so it will go through every mailbox looking for by the subject, and it will remove every email in the organization that has that particular subject. So we only get a couple of these, a year. Our security guys come to us and they're like, okay, we're getting flooded with this thing. We've already had, 35 people click the stupid link that, for no reason whatsoever, they click this link,
Oh.
This is, usually 2 days after they've had their training on security. And so supposedly they know how to validate, where a link goes, et cetera. So, so this allows me to, this particular version will go through every single mailbox at US Foods. And I just, here, email subjects, I specify what the subject is, et cetera. And then the code that does everything. So this invokes a PS session and grabs all my credentials, et cetera. And then we do a get-mailbox, specify our target, which in this case is going to be all mailboxes. Search mailbox, search query, by the subject, delete content. Boom, that's it. That nukes it out of everything. I have the same code, but I have a version. Let me show you this one. And so this is nuke email by list. So if I know that there's only 2 or 3 people that got something and I need to get that out of there, then I can run this version. I can show you what this one looks like. As I can find my mouse. There we go. Thank you. So here we go. So remember I was talking about browsing to a list of mailboxes, opening up a CSV, et cetera. So this is just an example of that where I can specify a text or CSV file and enter my subject and then hit the red button to nuke it out of there. So very useful. We've had a couple circumstances where, people have done something that they shouldn't have. We had somebody from payroll once send some stuff that they shouldn't have sent, and
How do you handle if they forwarded the email you're trying to delete?
we can't. Once it leaves our network, we can't do anything about it. But it's usually
Subject line changes, but the forward.
There's usually
I'm
a
just wondering if
part of
you
my language,
put
but
that
there's
in the
usually an oh
PowerShell.
shit moment that happens with about 10 microseconds after hitting send.
Yeah.
So they're already on the phone like, oh, get this out of there quick, and
Right.
it makes it to my group very, very quickly to do that stuff. So, here's a nice one. Let's take a look at this. I bet you guys will like this one.
Mark, I'm not sure where you want me to send that to you, but I posted it in the chat session.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's not in the chat. It's called.
Can you forward it to everybody? Or?
Yeah, I can try.
I can give you the URL to browse to if you want. If you just go to gist. There we go. Now go scroll down and there's a gist called Keep going.
I'm just gonna save this.
It's called User Profile PSM1.
I think most of the way down.
Not my chat, it's on the chat of the account. Let me add the YouTube channel.
There it is right there. That's it.
User profile, PSM1. Okay, cool.
I'll add to YouTube.
That one right there.
So you're using a Windows API here?
Yeah, this is using pinvoke. And I actually used some of the code from the guy that Mark mentioned that has the, oh goodness, Adam Driscoll. Adam Driscoll was the one that helped me with it.
Nice.
And another guy by the name of MS Administrator on, we all kind of collaborated on it together.
Very sweet. Thank you for sharing.
Hold on.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. Hey, speaking of which, next month, even though I won't be there, I do have a speaker lined up. It'll be Adam Bertram, and the topic is I'm looking for my notes. Give me just a minute.
Win32 API calls.
Infrastructure testing with Pester.
Yeah, actually, it's exciting.
Did y'all hear me?
Yes, we did. Thank you.
So what would have been nice is if you had this script that I've got up here, which is, make tiny. So you take any, super long URL, plug it in here, and it'll give you a tiny URL for it.
Nice.
Yeah,
that would have been nice. You'll have to give me that code, then I'll make use of it.
Is it a gist?
No, but we can take that code right now.
Name and password?
Okay.
Username and script.
Well, thanks. Now I just learned something.
Yay! I see it now. Cool. I'll use the code. Thanks.
You're welcome. So, folks, that's the end of the presentation I have for you. I hope that you guys will be able to take what we've done here, the sample code that I gave you, so that you can play with this, creating some forms. Just start with something simple, and then create a button there, and boom, you got a nice little user interface for yourself, and start passing those scripts out to people.
Is PowerShell Pro Tools the only one that supports XAML interface design?
XAML, you can do. I think you can do it with the admin script editor. Don't hold me to that, but I believe that you can in there. It's pretty comprehensive.
I think some guys have actually been authoring it as XAML, and then you bring it in. I've seen some posts about where you bring it in, but I can't remember the full. You can author it in Visual Studio and then pull it in.
It's really cryptic. I mean, I like the simple texts that I can read. So, so that's it, folks. So thank you for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Mark. Thanks a bunch. I'm gonna turn my camera on so you can see me for a sec.
Okay. Yeah, that's not gonna help anybody.
Really appreciate it, and everybody knows.
Oh, look, there he is.
I see you, Tom.
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate it, and great session, man. Good coverage too.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, if you have any questions or anything, or any of the scripts that I've written, as long as it's nothing proprietary to my work, I'm happy to share. You can reach me at markdmac@gmail.com.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Any questions?
What we saw when it's auto-generated the scripts and gave you a layout of your actual code, is that kind of best practice how to do it? When you create a button, you register that button right at the end of it, and then just go on to the next letterbox, or do you put all buttons on top, letterboxes?
No, so the way that the code will organize in the tab order.
Okay.
So whatever order that you create those entries in, that automatically gets added into the tab index. So that way, if if I'm at the, my user creations section there, and I go to first name, I can hit tab to go into the middle initial. I don't have to click in the box. That tab order is the order that the code will appear in the list.
Oh, okay.
So just, it's
Yeah.
logically, you know, as you're building it, it just keeps adding stuff in there. One of the things that I like to do is I'll create that form, make sure I get everything aligned where I want it to be. The one thing to make sure that you don't forget to do is to create your events. I can't tell you how many times I have forgotten to do that. I make the form, and it's beautiful. I paste it into ISE, and I've closed the browser, and I go, oh, shit. I forgot. And now I have to go look, you know, in a previous example, okay, what's the code that I need to add that click event and manually add that in there. Posh GUI does have an option for you to save a project, but it's not very intensive. You know, it doesn't remember a whole bunch of stuff, and it's not very user-friendly. So kind of design carefully, get it done. But honestly, I would really recommend purchasing the Posh tools, because for $40, and I can tell you that if you contact Adam, if you're going to buy for work, if you can get 4 or more, he'll give you a discount. So my company, he gave us a 10% discount. We were buying 5 licenses, and then afterwards I contacted him. I said, can I use that discount code? I'm going to buy for myself for home. And he gave me a new code for 50% off. So, I mean, really nice guy. And like I said, super responsive. I have nothing but praise for the man. And it's a great product. And using Visual Studio, I mean, I do a little bit of VB.NET programming, so I already know Visual Studio. So having a tool that I'm, you know, pretty intimately familiar with is extremely helpful. And I know it doesn't have bugs. I mean, you know, Visual Studio has been around for a long time, and Microsoft has nailed that pretty well. And using the Community Edition that Microsoft makes available for free too. I mean, you know, so it's not even a licensing issue. So that's even further, you know, reason to use it.
The other gentleman asked about dot source in it, but you put your function actually within the actual click code. Does that? I put my stuff at the very top of the script when I made a form.
Well, for this, the functions have to go within. There's a function space for that object.
Okay.
You have to have declared the object before you can have the function for it, because it's based off the same variable.
Okay.
So there is an order there that you have to go in there. But any tool that you use is going to set that up for you.
Brilliant. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, sir.
I couldn't download.
Oh.